The sitting is resumed. It's time for questions to the Minister for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs. Question 8 has been withdrawn. I call Emma Sheeran.
Question 1, please.
Minister.
Thank the member for her question. It is important that the ammonia strategy delivers the most effective measures to protect our environment. To do this, I need to consider all the relevant information available to me. Following a consultation in 2023, my department considered the responses and used this information to inform a reworked draft ammonia strategy. However, I wish to seek additional views on proposed mandatory ammonia reduction measures, and these will be included as part of the consultation process during the 2024 Nutrients Action Programme review. To allow time for this process to take place, I anticipate that it will be 2025 before the ammonia strategy is finalised and ready for me to take the Executive for approval and publication. I am aware that while agriculture makes up a significant contribution to Northern Ireland's economy, it also produces 97% of current ammonia emissions, and action on ammonia is urgently required. This action is required to support our local farm businesses and rural communities to thrive and be sustainable, while at the same time protecting our environment and meeting our legislative requirements. It is essential that the ammonia strategy is science-led and can deliver measures which protect nature, meet Northern Ireland's legal obligations and ensure a sustainable agriculture sector.
Emma Sheeran for supplementary.
Thanks to the Minister for that answer. And Minister, you referred in your answer there to the mandatory ammonia reduction strategies that will obviously be required for farmers. I just wonder what consideration you have given to the cost of this, particularly for smaller farmers, and for the practicality of these sorts of machinery on areas of natural constraint. Just concerned that it might work against farmers who are trying to break into an industry that is obviously calling out for producers at the minute.
Minister.
Thank the member for her question. She touches upon what is an important issue, because we need to incentivise uptake of the technology that's been outlined. And I have written to the DEFRA Secretary in London in terms of future agriculture funding for Northern Ireland, and made a case that she would have a separate and additional funding, which I would consider to be the Just Transition Fund for Agriculture, which would be capital funding to enable uptake of those. And I am engaging with the Secretary of State next Monday when I'm in London further to that letter.
Michelle McIlveen for supplementary.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. When officials were asked at the committee why planning applications for replacement dwellings or buildings which would lead to lower ammonia emissions are not assessed differently to new developments, we were told, and I quote, that the regulations don't give any scope for us to consider any difference between new and replacement developments, but we do totally understand the frustration that this must cause. Acknowledging those frustrations, will the Minister commit to change those regulations which are having a perverse impact on the outcomes which he wants to achieve?
Sir.
Thank the member for her supplementary question. Reductions in ammonia emissions in existing facilities will be taken into account in the new operational protocol to assess the impacts of air pollution on the natural environment, but the remaining level of ammonia pollution is the key factor which must be used by DERA to provide advice to planning authorities. Further to my response, I understand the issue you're outlining, which would be otherwise known as betterment, and I'm engaging with stakeholders around this in the days ahead, and as part of a ministerial roundtable that I've convened in relation to this issue, because I think it's important we have dialogue and we engage around this matter and the general issue of ammonia.
Justin McNulty for supplementary.
I would like to thank the Minister for his answers thus far. Given the recent critical report on river basin management plans by the Office for the Environmental Protection, what steps will the Minister take to ensure the new ammonia strategy is fully compliant with the Water Framework Directive regulations and contributes significantly to the Water Framework Directive environmental objectives? And what lessons could your department learn from what Tagash is doing in the south in relation to engaging and being proactive in relation to protecting river basins?
Thank you, Minister.
So the member has two questions in his supplementary question. One is in terms of engagement, and as I've outlined to Michelle McIlveen, that's something I've prioritised, and I've convened a ministerial roundtable around the issue of ammonia to engage with stakeholders in relation to this issue. The first one was in relation to the Office Environmental Protection Report last week in terms of river basin management plans, and I've been clearly on the record that I accept the recommendations that are set out within that, and it's important whatever we do in relation to ammonia or other matters within my portfolio we act in accordance to the law, and that's the area that the space that I'm in. Last week we talked an awful lot about water quality. Today, in terms of ammonia, we're talking about air quality, and we need to have the same focus in terms of dealing with the issues of air quality than we have around water, and the responsibility to deal with those issues, because in terms of water quality, we see that as played out in our rivers, lakes and lochs in Northern Ireland, but air quality is also a serious concern, and just because it is not as visible doesn't mean that we shouldn't take heed of the legal obligations to act.
Lord Elliott.
Thank you, Principal Deputy Speaker, and thank the Minister. Just a quick one on the planning applications and the response to them from NIEA around ammonia. They seem to have been delayed, and I'm just wondering, is there any update of it progressing or getting any better?
Firstly, I want to congratulate Lord Elliott on his elevation to the other place, and congratulations to that. In relation to planning applications, Northern Ireland Environment Agency is doing what it can in relation to that, but we have to act in accordance with the law and ensure our advice is given appropriately, reflecting that. Also, there is resource constraints. It's important we recognise that statutory consultees will act within the resources that is available to them. We've done what we can within Northern Ireland Environment Agency, but the budget for the next financial year will be important so we can provide those resources to the Environment Agency to respond to the planning applications.
Timothy Casson.
Very much. We have been assured that the current method DAERA use on assessing planning applications announced on the 19th of December 2023 are now fit for purpose, informed by science and evidence. As the emerging ammonia strategy is to be published shortly,
Mr. Casson.
Can the Minister confirm that the current robust science-led approach will remain in place until the new strategy is announced, ensuring that those that have their planning applications already in the system won't see the goalposts changed again?
Minister.
So I will always, as Minister, be guided by the evidence and science, particularly in relation to ammonia. If that evidence and science changes, then it would be negligent of me not to respond to that. So I can't say that nothing will change in the future, but it's important that we are guided by the evidence and science, and that's why, as in the Ministerial Roundtable, we're having discussions around the situation as it presents itself to me.
Alan Chambers.
Principal Deputy Speaker.
Minister.
I have already enacted legislation to restrict and control the ownership of XL bully dogs, and I am pleased that my ministerial colleague in the Republic of Ireland has moved to align legislation across the island. I understand that the rules there will broadly mirror the legal requirements already in place here and in the rest of the UK. For example, breeding, selling and rehoming XL bully dogs will be prohibited in the Republic of Ireland from the 1st of October 2024, matching the legal restrictions which I introduced here on the 5th of July. It will also be illegal to own an XL bully dog in the Republic of Ireland without a certificate of exemption from the 1st of February 2025, which is 1 month after it becomes illegal here. In the Republic of Ireland, certificates will only be issued to owners who can prove their dog has a licence, is microchipped and neutered. This is broadly in line with the conditions of exemption I have introduced here in Northern Ireland.
Alan Chambers for supplementary.
Minister, certainly when you brought this before the House back in March, and I asked a supplementary question around concerns I had about the residential settings of dogs, and we both agreed there was no perfect solution. But you did say that you couldn't live with yourself if you didn't do something, and you did bring forward that legislation, and I know those words were spoken with sincerity. But given that there's been a number of fatalities and serious maulings both in the UK and throughout the Republic of Ireland over recent months in residential settings,
Mr. Chambers, is there a question?
Could the Minister perhaps reflect that maybe the perfect solution is a complete ban of these dogs?
Minister.
I am aware of the members' ongoing concerns around potential attacks by XL bully dogs in residential settings. The safeguards I have introduced are aimed at protecting public safety. To place legal restrictions on a dog in the home is neither feasible, practical or enforceable, and would severely impinge upon an owner's ability to look after and enjoy time with their dog in a private dwelling. The fact is that all dog owners are responsible for controlling their dog, whether in public or private settings. My department continues to promote responsible dog ownership, and I would urge all dog owners to educate themselves about their dog's needs and to be aware of changes in behaviour or temperament. If Assembly colleagues or stakeholders advocating for further legislation to provide protection in residential settings where an XL bully dog is kept can provide viable suggestions, my officials will consider any such detail received.
David Honeyford for supplementary.
Thank you, Principal Deputy Speaker. Just to ask the Minister, based that we're living on an island and this is an issue right across, can he give us more information on the engagement that he's had with his counterparts in the South on this issue?
I met with Minister Humphreys and Secretary-General Mary Hurley on the 22nd of July 2024 and had productive discussions on current issues, including the ban of XL bully dogs. My officials have also met with their Republic of Ireland counterparts to discuss implementation processes and any potential cross-border issues. That engagement is ongoing. I am committed to working with Minister Humphreys and our counterpart not only on XL bully safeguards, but also on wider dog control issues and the promotion of dog ownership across this island.
Call Deborah Erskine.
Principal Deputy Speaker, question 3, please.
Minister.
I would like to highlight the robust legislation that Northern Ireland already has in place to regulate commercial dog breeding establishments. The Welfare of Animals, Dog Breeding Establishments and Miscellaneous Amendments Regulations 2013 empowers local councils to licence and inspect potential or current breeding establishments. The 2013 regulations also provide powers for council inspectors to act if a commercial breeder does not meet the standards required. This includes the power to suspend or revoke a licence. Unlicensed commercial breeders and licence holders who breach the conditions of these regulations can face prosecution and, in conviction, carries a maximum penalty of 6 months' imprisonment and or a fine of £5,000. To combat the illegal breeding and trafficking of low-welfare pups, my department supports the local councils and other statutory bodies under the Pause for Thought initiative. This initiative, chaired by my department, comprises representatives from the Police Service of Northern Ireland, His Majesty's Revenue and Customs, local councils, Belfast Harbour Police, ferry companies and my department's animal welfare policy, enforcement and portal inspection teams. In addition, my department continues to work with local councils and the other relevant statutory bodies to promote messages and communications that urge the public to secure dogs from reputable and licensed breeders. I am conscious that dog breeding is an area where stakeholders express concern and more action will be required in the time ahead. Therefore, I am keen to explore their views and what action they believe is needed, as well as discussing my intention to introduce a version of Lucy's Law to Northern Ireland.
Deborah Erskine for supplementary.
Thank the Minister for his answer. He will be of no surprise that this is a very hot topic in my constituency of Fermanagh and South Tyrone, and indeed he has referenced Lucy's Law there, and I welcome a commitment to that. I want to ensure that there is no loopholes within the legislation, that actually breeders act then legally within what has been set out. So can he commit that he will also look at how those people act legally, but may have a loophole within the system that they can access?
Minister.
I thank the member for her question. And when we're designing legislation and policy around animal welfare, we need to be very conscious of the issue you've outlined in terms of people's ability to navigate the legislation and to create loopholes around it all. So that's why it's important when we're developing it, we do it correctly. In terms of Lucy's Law, I am conscious that Northern Ireland is the only part of the UK which is yet to introduce legislation to regulate the third-party sale of pups and kittens. Therefore, I would like to confirm that it remains my intention to deliver a version of Lucy's Law in Northern Ireland within the lifetime of this Assembly. My officials are currently developing options for my consideration, and I will carefully consider all options and then decide on the best one for appropriately regulating third-party sale of pups and kittens in Northern Ireland. Any proposals I am minded to introduce will be subject to public consultation. I am also keen to engage with the animal welfare sector and intend to facilitate discussions with key stakeholders in the time ahead as I determine the best course of action in terms of implementing Lucy's Law.
Cara Hunter for supplementary.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Minister, thank you for your answer so far. My question is just around how does your department monitor how well or not so well different council areas are looking into illegal breeding? And also, I'm aware that there is an animal rights abuse event next month in the Long Gallery. Will you attend this important event? Thank you.
So in terms of the second question, I'm happy if you send me through details of that. We'll consider that in terms of diary and availability. In terms of the first one, it is obviously for district councils and around their enforcement and around that. If there is concerns around that, I'm happy the member writes to me and raises that. But we do seek to work in partnership with district councils, and that's what the importance around this area is, working together. I was in Larne last week to see the Pause for Thought initiative, which is essentially about tackling puppy smuggling, and it's seeing all those different bodies coming together to be able to deal with something which is really, really insidious and wrong, and that's what's really, really key, that we all, district councils, HMRC, the police, my department, come together around these issues. And stakeholders in terms of animal welfare charities, for example, have a really, really crucial role to play, and that's why I want to sit down with them and discuss next steps around policy and legislation, because I do want to work with people on these issues to stamp out animal cruelty in Northern Ireland.
Donny Donnelly for supplementary.
Thank you, Principal Deputy Speaker. I'm glad to hear the Minister is out and about and going to Larne these days. Great. Can I just ask for a bit more detail on how puppy smuggling is being tackled?
So thank you, and yes, I did enjoy my day in Larne. I was up in Glenarm as well, and it's a great constituency to visit. The Pause for Thought initiative is a quite key intervention where we're all working together to tackle that. I would highlight as part of that we do public communications to the general public around this issue, to make them understand that they have a role to play, to not be part of this, and to be very, very conscious when they're buying pups and kittens, that they're very aware of where they came from and to assure themselves in that regard. One last thing I would like to say in response to the member's question is that I really want to do a good bit of legislation and policy around animal welfare so we can tackle animal cruelty. But what crucially I'll need resource and funding to do that, because it requires officials to bring that forward and to consult and engage, and then also to bring it to this chamber. So the budget for next year for my department around this issue will be absolutely crucial, because if I don't get a settlement which is fair and just to allow me to do that, then we're unfortunately not going to be able to do the work we need around tackling animal cruelty.
Glenmore Patrick.
Question 4.
Following the Executive's approval of the Lough Neagh Report and Action Plan on the 18th of July, the focus has turned to implementation of the actions. Good progress has been made on a number of actions, including, for example, the development of a Lough Neagh science platform, the launch of 2 small business research initiatives, and the implementation of the interagency blue-green algae monitoring protocol. Whilst the action plan offers a comprehensive approach, it acknowledges that achieving substantial recovery will take many years due to the complex nature of the issues at Lough Neagh. There is a significant amount of work to do alongside our stakeholders, which will take both time and resources. I am firmly committed to ensuring the implementation of the action plan as swiftly as possible.
One area of concern I have around the action plan is the fact that there was no funding support for fishermen who saw a drastic cut to their income last year and are facing probably an even more dire situation this year. Has the Minister any plans to introduce emergency funding support for those who make a living on the loch?
Minister.
Thank the member for his follow-up question, and we'll be meeting with fishers from Lough Neagh tomorrow around this, and I'm very aware of the challenges in terms of inland fisheries in Lough Neagh and the pressures that they've been under. I have engaged with officials around this. There is a number of issues arising from that, particularly in terms of availability of funding and the recurrent nature of any support that will be required, but it's something I have been exploring with officials, and I've been engaging with people who are directly affected by this tomorrow.
John Blair for supplementary.
Principal Deputy Speaker, thank you. The Minister might be aware that yesterday I asked a question to the First Minister, Deputy First Minister in relation to Lough Neagh, and the question was a closely related matter of the Environmental Improvement Plan. I got a reply about executive confidentiality, even though the matter I referenced has been widely publicly reported and referenced by the Office of Environmental Protection. It relates directly to the question, Principal Deputy Speaker, which is, can the Minister give us an update on Northern Ireland's first draft environment strategy and also the Environmental Improvement Plan itself?
Thank you.
Thank you, John. So the Environmental Improvement Plan will be Northern Ireland's first environment strategy. There was a legal obligation for that to be adopted of July of last year. Upon taking office in February, I brought that to the Executive in March, and I will continue to engage with Executive colleagues to secure the adoption of that. Subsequent bringing the paper in March, the Office of Environmental Protection has commenced an investigation as a result of the failure to adopt the Environmental Improvement Plan. There is also legal challenges that have been lodged with my department around that. So I will continue to engage with executive colleagues in relation to this. This is relevant to Lough Neagh because the catchment area of Lough Neagh is substantial, and it's important we take significant environmental action to address those issues. And the Environmental Improvement Plan is not just a statutory obligation, but is also a tool to be able to improve our environment.
Patsy McLone.
Could I ask the Minister, what is the projected cost, overall cost of implementation of the Lough Neagh Action Plan? And of that projected overall cost, how much has been assured to date?
So we're currently working through with officials, so I can give you a correct answer to that, because I've got some estimates that I've been working out myself, but I want to engage with officials so we can give you a substantial response, because there's a significant range of actions that need to be taken. So you've got the investment required in wastewater infrastructure, that's a significant investment that's needed, but also the interventions around agriculture. Some of that is mainstreamed as part of agricultural practice, so I want to make sure I'm giving you a correct figure in relation to that. What I've done in this year is I've essentially reallocated resources within my department towards Lough Neagh and the interventions that are required out of that. I'll give the right back to the member and give him a full breakdown of the spend around that, but the cost of repairing and remediating the damage in Lough Neagh is way in excess of what it would have been if this situation hadn't been allowed to unfold in the first place.
Call Jerry Kelly.
I am committed to taking action to restrict the consumption of a range of single-use plastic products where sustainable alternatives are easily available and affordable. This includes transposing the Single-Use Plastics Directive. The primary objective of the Single-Use Plastic Directive is to protect our environment. Single-use plastic products are wasteful use of resources, being used only once and before being discarded, impacting on both our marine and natural environment. The introduction of these regulations will reduce the volume and impact of plastic products on our environment. Officials are currently working to progress the legislation which will introduce restrictions on the most commonly littered single-use plastic items such as straws and cutlery. Single-use drinks containers must have a lid that remains attached, and other products such as plastic, such as sanitary and tobacco products, should have clear labelling of appropriate disposal. My officials will also progress a plan to reduce the consumption of single-use cups and food containers. My department has also taken a wide range of further actions to tackle the scourge of plastic pollution, including working to bring forward regulations to ban the sale and supply of single-use vapes and wet wipes containing plastic.
Jerry Kelly for a supplementary.
Because Leisnara or something Fragrison, I think the Minister was actually very comprehensive. But you did mention legislation, so I just wanted to ask, is the legislation primary legislation Westminster that you're talking about, or is it secondary legislation? You mentioned bringing in further legislation.
Minister?
Yeah, this is secondary legislation.
I call Sean Mulholland for a supplementary.
Thank you, Premier Deputy Speaker. Does the Minister intend to increase or introduce additional levies to target single-use plastics?
Thank you, Sean. My department introduced new carrier bag legislation in April 2022. It increased the carrier bag levy charge from 5 pence to 25 pence and extended the scope to include all new carrier bags with a retail price of £5 or less. The primary objective remains to protect our environment by influencing consumer behaviour and promote a significant reduction in the usage of single-use plastic items. I will consider all options to find the most suitable way to help reduce the impact of single-use plastic items on our environment.
Call Matthew O'Toole for a supplementary.
Thank you, Principal Deputy Speaker. Minister, I welcome the fact that this is going to be transposed, hopefully without much delay, into local law. Can I ask, on the related subject of dog fouling, have you any plans to increase penalties for dog fouling? Because obviously, particularly post-COVID, that has been an increased subject of interest in many local authorities.
It's a bit of a pivot from single-use plastics. All right. But it's an important issue, and one of the main issues where Harvey Milk got elected as the first openly gay parliamentarian in America was on dog fouling. So all politics is local. I'm happy to consider the issue if the member writes to me around that. I have no immediate plans around it, but if the member wants to articulate a strong case, I'm prepared to give it a strong hearing.
Call Padraig Delargy.
Over a shade, a lot of hope questions.
Minister.
My department is continuing to progress work in relation to monitoring the site, pursuing a criminal just outcome against the former operators and determining the best approach for remediation through an industry standard process. A draft remediation strategy has been developed in relation to the long-term remediation of the Maboy site in line with industry standards. My officials have published the Maboy Remediation Options Appraisal Report on the DAERA website to support the completion of the remediation strategy. In terms of next steps, officials are working through an industry standard process following a land contamination risk management guidance. This includes consultation with the public to seek their views on a draft remediation strategy for the Maboy site. The size and complexity of the Maboy site means that its remediation will not be a quick fix and will be subject to affordability considerations in the context of constraints of public sector finances. It is vitally important that all interested parties have the opportunity to comment on the draft strategy. There is no agreed preferred option, and there will not be until a consultation has been completed and responses have been carefully considered. NEA continues to implement a comprehensive environmental monitoring programme at the site, and regular water quality reports are published and are freely available on the DAERA website. To date, I am advised that there has been no adverse impact on the safety of drinking water being supplied from the River Fall.
Padraig Delargy for supplementary.
Thank you, Minister, for your comprehensive answer, and I think you've provided a lot of clarity on those details. We're all in agreement that this is an ecological disaster, that it's a complete national scandal, not just for Derry, but right across Ireland. So I'm glad that your department are working on that. Would you agree to meet with me, with residents and with environmental groups who are keen to campaign to make sure that there's truth and there's resolution to this scandal?
Minister.
What occurred in the past in relation to Maboy was a complete disgrace, and whilst I will continue to pursue the issue of the polluter pays and the principle around that, what is happening here is the public sector and the people of Northern Ireland are having to pick up the tab in terms of looking towards remediation of that, and that's not lost upon me. So I'm happy to meet with yourself and others around this, because I know it's a key issue, not just for the people of Derry, Londonderry, but also for Northern Ireland more widely.
Mark Durkin for supplementary.
And I thank the Minister for his answers. Minister, given the eye-watering projected cost of clean-up, the current cross-cutting impasse caused to the completion of the A6, and the potential catastrophic consequences to the environment and to human health should Maboy remain unsolved, does the Minister agree with me that there should be a specific commitment in the programme for government to get this issue sorted once and for all and funded?
There is a commitment from me to address this issue within the financial resources available to me, and that's the challenge around this, because, as you know, the cost for remediation of this could be quite substantial. In terms of the programme for government, I'm glad that that was launched yesterday for consultation, and I would encourage all members of the House and of Northern Ireland to give their feedback in relation to that. But what we've got to do in terms of the programme for government is also be realistic of what we can achieve within a reduced mandate. We lost 2 years of this mandate as a result of this House not sitting, and what we're trying to do is sort of play catch-up in terms of the issues that need to be addressed, and Maboy is one of those.
Neil McAllister for supplementary.
I thank the Minister for his answers so far, and just picking up on some of the things that you'd mentioned in both the previous answers, specifically on the review of environmental crime fines and the penalties. Will these cover waste crimes so a scandal like this does not happen in the future?
The review and consultation around the fines and penalties associated with environmental crime is really, really important, and it will cover waste crime because it's something I'm quite concerned about. Officials are working at this in terms of taking this forward, and once we launch that consultation, I would encourage everyone to make a response to that.
Quick, David Brooks, very quickly, if you.
7.
1 minute left, Minister.
Oh, right, okay. The Welfare of Animals Act, Northern Ireland 2011, is the foundation upon which statutory bodies, including local councils, the PSNI and my department, carry out their duties in order to improve animal welfare. It is a robust piece of legislation which provides a range of powers for dealing with animal welfare cases. These include being proactive in dealing with cases in order to prevent unnecessary suffering and tough fines and penalties for serious animal welfare offences. The 2011 Act is on a par with animal welfare legislation in the rest of the UK. Whilst I have no immediate plans to review the Act, I wish to engage with relevant stakeholders at the time ahead in terms of future animal welfare policy and legislation. The suitability and capability of all legislation, including this, is something I'm willing to consider as and when evidence is presented for change as part of that stakeholder engagement.
David, unfortunately there's not time to ask a supplementary question, but you will get a response. So that ends the period for listed questions. We'll now move on to 15 minutes of topical questions. Question 6 have been withdrawn, and I call Patsy McGlone.
Minister, can I ask you just where current policy development is at the department in regard to just transition?
Minister. A number of issues around that. We will start consultation quite soon in terms of the regulations which will establish the Just Transition Commission, and then we'll make the regulations and have that established next year. So I think that's important. The other one is in terms of Just Transition Fund for Agriculture, and as I've outlined earlier in terms of question time, I've made a case to the DEFRA Secretary that there should be a separate and additional capital funding to Northern Ireland, which would be the Just Transition Fund for Agriculture, and that would be an invest to save measure in terms of enabling us to drive down greenhouse gas emissions, but also deal with the issues we've talked about today around air quality, ammonia and water quality. So there's a lot of stuff that needs to be done in that place. Also in terms of the draft Green Growth Strategy, I'll be bringing that to the Executive very soon and seeking endorsement of that. And a just transition is a core part of that, because I'm very keen as we travel the road to net zero, it is just and fair, and it's absolutely key that we do that. And that's where our economy needs to be as well, in terms of looking after the most vulnerable in society and ensuring equality throughout.
Patsy, for a supplementary.
You touched upon something there that kind of inspired me to follow another line of thinking, Minister, and that is in relation to just transition and the economy. What support measures or what measures have been discussed with the Department for the Economy, particularly in regard to on-farm, on-yard measures that can be implemented or brought in to support that transition, especially around slurry and the disposal of slurry?
Minister.
So I work closely with the Department of Economy in the Small Business Research Initiative, and I had a meeting with Conor Murphy yesterday, because we work quite closely in relation to these areas, because we share a common desire to reach the road to net zero in a just and fair manner. A good bit of that sits with me in terms of taking that forward, and I'll be making announcements very soon in terms of phase 2 of the Small Business Research Initiative on the sustainable utilisation of slurry. There's quite a lot we need to do around the issue of water quality, and a better way to manage slurry and manure is absolutely critical. And I think this is something I'm going to be talking about an awful lot over the rest of this mandate.
Call on you, Murphy.
Good Privlas, Can Collier and Minister, just to stay on the topic of just transition, I appreciate that you may not have seen a new EU report which notes a temporary just transition fund should be established outside the common agricultural policy. Would you agree that this could be a useful precedent in your engagements with the British Government?
100%, and that's what we need to do. I'm very passionate about a just transition within agriculture, because we need to ensure that the work that we are going to carry out to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and reach net zero is done fairly, and we support people in that journey, and that's why we need to be able to provide those incentives and support. I think those developments are quite useful in terms of the case I will make to DEFRA. I've made it in writing, and I'll be making it in person next week.
On Murphy for a supplementary.
And I'd like to thank the Minister for his answer. Minister, the fact that the EU actually recognises the need for additional funding for this aspect indicates that this is not the purpose of the current agricultural budget, which currently goes to farmers. Would you agree with that?
Minister.
So what we've got is we have a earmarked amount of funding. The total amount of earmarked funding, which includes agriculture and also fisheries, is about 330 million. And that's largely resource. And what the case I'm making is we should have separate capital funding around that. Also, the case I've made is that earmark funding, and it was guaranteed up until the end of March of next year, following our departure from the EU, that should be indexed in line with inflation going forward, and absolutely critical that takes place. One concern I do have is in relation to that earmark funding, and you will have read media reports last week in terms of the earmark funding within DEFRA for England and the potential for that to be reduced. I'm quite concerned in terms of how it could affect Northern Ireland, and I'm making strong representations to that effect, because if we want to improve water and air quality and reduce greenhouse gas emissions, we do need the funding to support agri-food to travel that journey, and this is something that's absolutely key for me, and something I've engaged with my Scottish and Welsh counterparts on very recently, and also then I'll engage with the Secretary of State in London next week.
Call Donny Donnelly.
Thank you, Principal Deputy Speaker. The Minister will no doubt be aware that today is World Suicide Prevention Day, and evidence suggests that people living in rural areas have higher rates of suicide, and there are higher rates of suicide in rural-based occupations such as agriculture. So I'd like to ask the Minister to outline initiatives undertaken to support and improve mental health for people living and working in rural areas.
Minister.
Thank the member for his important question. The Tackling Rural Poverty and Social Isolation, otherwise known as TRIPSI, framework, which has been in operation since 2016, includes initiatives which address loneliness and improve physical and mental health and well-being. The Farm Families Health Check Programme, in conjunction with the Public Health Agency and Northern Health and Social Care Trust, provides a comprehensive physical and mental health screening and advice service to farmers who visit livestock markets and for rural people who attend a range of community events which the screening vehicle attends annually across Northern Ireland. Where necessary, referrals are then made to general practitioners or appropriate support services. Further to this initiative, the Rural Support Charity, which are also funded through the TRIPSI programme, has commenced a go-to resource for farmers and their families in rural Northern Ireland whenever they have a personal and/or farm business-related crisis. Rural Support provides a range of programmes and services for farmers and farm family members in support of their farm business and personal well-being. Their objective is to reduce emotional distress and help alleviate poor mental health triggers, which they can measure through use of well-established Warwick-Edinburgh mental well-being scale, with onward referrals being made to appropriate support services as required. My department also has a long-standing funding relationship with the Young Farmers Club of Ulster, through which they promote good health and well-being for young people in rural areas of Northern Ireland. Finally, CAFRE provides a student support service accessible to all learners, which includes a focus on health and well-being.
Donny Donnelly.
Thank you very much, Minister, and thank you for your answer. I'm sure the Minister will agree with me that these rates are far too high, even though the work is ongoing, and I'm glad to hear it is. I wonder, would he join with me in encouraging people that are experiencing suicidal thoughts to reach out to someone, whether it be a GP or Lifeline or Samaritans?
I would, and I think this is an important issue, and unfortunately I have a number of friends who took their own life through suicide. Some of that was due to the societal attitudes in Northern Ireland towards LGBT people. And I think it's important that we send out a message from this place that you're not alone, and to reach out and to speak to people to seek support.
Call Steve Aiken.
Can I ask the Minister when he's proposing to publish the Strategic Investment Board report into the TB Strategic Partnership Group, I think, which was commissioned well over a year ago?
I thank the member for his question. That report has been received. I've read it. We've shared it with former members of TPEP as far as I'm aware. I'll double check that, whether they've received it or not. And also I'm happy to share it with firstly with the ERA committee, if that would be appropriate and people would be happy. That would be the way I would share this report, but I'm happy for it to be shared.
Steve Aiken for supplementary.
Minister, you'll be aware of some of the changes and views in bovine TV that DEFRA have been coming with this as well. Is the Minister involved in any conversations, because this is indeed related to the previous answer you just gave, of where we are on bovine TV, and are we going to adopt a similar approach as DEFRA is?
Minister.
So the issue of TB is a serious issue. It causes me concern. primarily not financial, which is a real issue in terms of the pressures upon my department, but the issue of concern it has for me is in terms of the mental health impact it has upon farmers, because when you have a TB breakdown, it is a significant impact upon what our family businesses, and we need to take action in relation to this. I'm meeting Minister McConalogue on Friday in Dublin in relation to what they're doing and what we're looking to undertake, because I commissioned the new Chief Veterinary Officer, Brian Dewar, upon taking up office in April, to undertake a quick review in terms of where we're at in that. We're approaching a point in the next number of months, hopefully October, November, where we'll announce the way forward in relation to that. I'm very cognizant of the developments that have taken place in relation to England, and I will make announcements further to this. But let me just be clear in concluding. I take this issue very, very seriously. It's important whatever we do going forward is guided by evidence and science, but also takes into account the impact this is having upon farmers across Northern Ireland.
Well, Jonathan Buckley.
Deputy Speaker, pollution of our waterways, rivers and Lough Neagh is obviously a serious issue. What is the Minister's Department's assessment when we look at all of the complex and competing issues as to the impact of slurry runoff into those rivers and Lough Neagh?
Minister.
So the issue of water quality in Northern Ireland, we all know it's quite a significant concern, and the Office of Environmental Protection have issued their comments in relation to that. There is an AFBI report around water quality, which I will share with the member around this, but approximately about a quarter of the issues in terms of poor water quality can be attributed to wastewater infrastructure, about 12% in terms of septic tanks, and about 60% in terms of agricultural runoff. We're doing further research in terms of the specific elements around Lough Neagh, but it would be my understanding that a good element of that is in terms of diffuse pollution, and what we need to do is we need to find ways to be able to tackle that, and that's why we're taking forward a number of measures which will be consulted upon as part of the Nutrients Action Programme in terms of the management of slurry, and there's some stuff that we're going to be announcing in the time ahead that, from engagement with the Ulster Farmers Union and the APRA, they're very keen to see us roll out at pace, which is sustainable utilisation of slurry. So that's one thing, what action we're taking with regards to that. The other one is in terms of LESI, which is the low emission slurry spreading equipment, and how we can actually incentivise uptake of that. So there's interventions we can take in relation to this. I also understand the concerns around planning and ammonia, and how that's one of the issues that farmers have been coming to me, that they want to be able to get better ways to manage it, and that's why I have this ministerial roundtable convened so we can work through those issues.
Jonathan Buckley for a supplementary.
Minister for his answer. I want to be very practical. One of the issues really affecting farmers is the inflexibility surrounding a slurry season opening on the 15th of October through to the 31st of January, with very unpredictable weather, to put it mildly, in Northern Ireland. This simply is not realistic for many farmers, putting them under huge pressure to get slurry out in sometimes very wet conditions, rather than having some flexibility and predicting better weather and better conditions on the ground. Will the Minister lobby on this issue and look into it as a genuine way of trying to reduce runoff into waterways and Lough Neagh?
So I'm aware of the issues the members outlined in terms of the closed period, and I'm going to be honest with them. In the current situation we have with regards to water quality in Northern Ireland, I cannot move towards changing that, and I don't think I would have credibility with others in society to change the closed period in this. But in terms of the interventions that I've been outlining to the members, that if we're actually to be able to take action in terms of better management of slurry, then options are available to us going forward. But at the current moment, I can't look at changing that, and I'm just going to be honest with you on that.
Call David Brooks.
Thank you, Principal Deputy Speaker. And thank the Minister for his answer so far. The Minister will be aware of statistics released recently that show the number of dairy farmers in decline across the UK, with 440 farmers exiting the industry in the year preceding April 2024. Could he outline what steps he is taking to support local farmers, dairy farmers, to remain profitable and remain in the industry?
Minister.
I thank the member for his question. So what you're often talking about here in Northern Ireland is family farms and businesses, and I take that issue quite seriously, and that is why the Future Farm Support Development Programme, we're rolling out packages and measures. The whole focus of that is about building resilience within the industry with the complete guiding aim of sustainable productivity, because that's where we're at in relation to this. We are engaging with people as we're rolling out those packages and measures, but I'm determined in this role as Minister to actually deliver a strong future for agriculture in Northern Ireland, and that means where we have a situation where environmental and economic sustainability go hand in hand, and that's absolutely critical that we get to that. Previous policy was about favouring intensification, and we're very clearly focused upon sustainable productivity now.
David Brooks for supplementary.
The Minister, could the Minister also outline perhaps what avenues he is supporting to ensure that young people who want to seek out a career as a primary producer have a pathway and support to get into the industry in that way?
Yeah, so this is one of the packages and measures that we're looking at as part of the Future Farm Support Development Programme, and we need to be able to get more people into the industry and to encourage them into that. My vision is that in time we have a situation where we actually have more people wanting to get in it than there is availability. There is one key issue around this, which is about land use and land use management, because we want to be able to encourage people to pass land through the generations, and that's something that we're going to explore over the time ahead.
Thank you, Minister. So that ends question time and topical questions to the Minister. So we are going to return to the debate on budgetary pressures, and I call... Oh, hold on, I need a